Hi, I'm Ashy, and today I'm showing you the biggest painting I've ever done. This is 2 by 4 feet. So I'll get into some more details about the painting, but let's jump right into the sketching part. I started by just drawing a straight line for the horizon and then sketching in the background hills and the foreground hills. It's super basic at this point. Then I go into the lighthouse on the hill. So I started really light because it's a little annoying to erase on the canvas. And I just started basically by getting the 2 lines in to represent the sides of the tower. From there, I just add intersecting lines and add in details within those shapes as I go. So if you just take it one shape at a time, it makes it much more manageable so that you don't get lost into drawing every single detail all at once. I also add the shape of the driveway that leads up to the lighthouse in the same way. So I'm really just looking at the reference photo and looking at the angles of the lines. I'm not trying to draw what I feel like the driveway should look like. I'm just looking at the angles of the line and drawing it in there. After I get the driveway in, I finish off the parts of the building, making sure that it kind of fits into that driveway shape that I had added. And at this point, everything's pretty flat, but I add in those details of perspective to make it look more three-dimensional as I go. So I start with just like the front-facing shapes, basic shapes, rectangles, trapezoids, right? And then I add the three-dimensional planes with angled lines back, or down or up, to make it appear like it's receding into the canvas. So a little bit about the painting. I didn't make this super complex because it is such a large scale. It's the first time I've done this large scale. This painting took about 4 hours total, but multiple days to complete. And to make it a much more manageable video, I'm really speeding it up a lot. But if anyone is interested in like a multi-video, real-time painting series of videos, let me know, and that's something I can look into doing. So for this painting, I did kind of blend 2 different reference photos that I took while I was in Ireland to get the composition that I liked for this size of canvas. Like I said, I wanted it to be relatively simple, but to have that strong focal point. And I really loved the Irish lighthouse and the hills, so I chose that subject for just this giant but like still calming painting. Once the drawing is in, I mix up a large wet wash for the underpainting. So with acrylic, you can water it down and make it like thinner and more transparent. So I do that, and I use this like moody gray color, mixing blue, black, and white. And again, just lots of water and thin it out. Paint that over the entire painting as a like underlayer or a underpainting. And I can go right over the lighthouse with this because it is transparent at this point, so I can still see all of my sketches underneath. I mix in a slightly thicker mix here and blend in some of this white gray into the sky area with a like fluffy blender brush to make it look like clouds. This is still pretty transparent at this point. It's a little bit thicker, but it's not just straight paint. So you're getting some of the underpainting kind of shining through that layer. And then I mixed up an even thicker version of a similar gray blue to the original color and paint the distant hills. So for this, I'm using a very large round brush, not looking at getting anything detailed, just basically slapping on paint. And I don't worry about getting it really smooth because having those brush strokes show adds like texture and makes it appear or gives it the illusion of more than just like a flat space. It adds the illusion of shadows and depth. As for the ocean, I add in a little bit more blue to the mix. So while I'm doing this, I kind of vary the mix as I go. So I'll add more white to some areas. I'll add a little bit of even red to some areas to make it have like a purple undertone, and add more blue to areas to make it darker and deeper. I do try to keep the colors nearer the land, so both the distant hills and the foreground hills. I try to keep those areas lighter with more white. And then the areas where the ocean would be deeper, I try to make it have darker, deeper value colors there. I also keep my brush strokes mostly horizontal for the ocean. I do add in some very subtle and like shallow Z-shaped patterns, and that just creates the illusion of movement in the water without having to go and like add every single wave or ripple or movement. So keeping it generally horizontal, but with some slight Z-shaped motions. So after getting the ocean where I was pretty happy with it, I do add a slightly more bluish wash to the distant mountains. So a wash can be like I did with the underpainting, where it's just covering everything, but you can also add a wash over previously painted dried layers, and it's transparent. So it's going to still show what's underneath, but it'll just alter like the value or the hue just a little bit. Like for this instant with the hills, it made it just a little bit cooler of a tone. And I add a gray wash, same idea, very transparent, very thinned out, but gray over the whole ocean to make it look a little bit more like moody and match the vibe that I was going for. I felt like it was just a little bit too bright and vivid for like a cloudy, more slightly overcast day. So I just added gray over the whole thing. I let all that dry and then started on the foreground. I did miss a bit on the filming here, but basically I'm just adding green and I'm altering the hue and value subtly as I go across the page, just like I did for the ocean. For the hill where the lighthouse is built, the like front facing part of it is all like rocky, craggy bits, basically like a cliff almost. And so I'm using like a warm grayish brown for that. And then on the hill that's sloping away and down from the lighthouse, it's the lit side of the hill. So the grass that's on that hill will be brighter. To make the green look brighter, just add more yellow to it, and that will make it look more sunlit. So it's lighter, but it's not adding white, because white makes it like a pastel green, which is not natural for grass, but adding yellow makes it give it that sunlit green look. For those rocky areas, I kind of scrape away paint with a cut up gift card, and then I use a palette knife to layer on some thicker areas of paint, but to make it look more geometric, less smooth. And then I just add some additional like texture and color to the foreground hill. This isn't really the focal point, so it doesn't have to be super detailed, but I wanted to kind of smooth out some of those previous brush strokes. And then for the background, I add a very thin, transparent wash of white to the sky and the background hills. And that just makes them look like a little bit misty and gives the illusion of distance using atmospheric perspective. So things farther away fade out and look less defined and less vivid in color. Then I return to kind of my focal point here. So I'm adding some small details with a smaller brush and a palette knife to the rocky areas, just to, again, build up more texture there, and make it look really bumpy and jagged. And then I finally start on the lighthouse. So since that underpainting was so transparent, I can still see the outline of the lighthouse very well through that paint. And I was a little bit more careful when I went toward the thicker paints in the ocean to kind of avoid the lighthouse a little bit more. So I just use a small flat brush as well as like a palette knife to get some straight lines and work my way around the roofs of the building. And I'm just using gray basically, but varying the value a little bit so that some areas look a little bit reflected. After I get in those black details, I move on to using some pure white paint and paint the building. So I just start at the top of the tower and then work my way down the painting. And I do paint around the window shapes. So I could easily paint over it later because, again, acrylic is an opaque medium, right? So you can paint over things, whether it's dark to light or light to dark. But I really felt like I wanted to do some negative painting here and paint around, just so that I could see the shapes building up and make sure that I was happy with them as I was going. So after I kind of get the first layer of white in, I do add some gray to the shadowed areas of the tower. And I do this wet on wet so that it blends out a little bit and the gray and the white kind of blend together, and give that subtle transition, especially for this curved tower. Having a subtle transition from the shadow to the bright lit side creates that sense of roundness. So I really just work the rest of the buildings the same way, just starting with the bright white and adding gray for the shadows. Acrylic does dry pretty fast, so I kind of take it one section at a time, making sure that I'm adding shadows in as I go so that, again, it blends it out just a little bit. But you can always add layered shadows on later as well. You don't have to do it wet on wet. And really the shadows are the most important thing here to really create that illusion of depth. If you don't have those contrasting shadows, you can't really tell that there are different planes on the building. So, you really need the sides that are lit to be that bright white, and then wherever the shadowed sides are to have that deeper, darker gray. So as I'm going, I'm just making sure that I'm keeping those shadows really consistent and making sure that they're high enough contrast. Now, they're not like black or anything, but there is a distinct contrast between the white, bright lit sides and the gray parts. So once I'm pretty happy with the basic shape of the building, I just go and start adding more details. And so that includes like some of the areas around the base of the building, creating kind of the driveway, parking lot area gray, and making sure it's built up enough in terms of the color and the shadows, and then going into the building itself and painting in the details like the staircases, the chimneys, and things like that. So again, with acrylic being opaque, I can paint those bright white chimneys over the darker areas if I need to. So I can adjust the shapes really easily here and not have to worry about, like with watercolor, which is the other medium that I paint with, painting around the light areas. So it's great to just be able to paint the bright white over the blue and the gray as needed. So at this point, it really is just kind of fiddling with some of these details, adding in the things that are gonna kind of make this focal point pop more. And with those chimneys as well, I'm also painting, the bright white side, and then the planes on the left side are going to be gray to give them that three-dimensional like cube shape. And then I go in and start painting kind of railings and windows and doors. So I have kind of black details, and I'll add some red details that really, you can't tell as much on the video, but they really pop in real life. It's very, very minimal, just the railings like around the balcony at the top of the tower, and then there's like a stairway on the right that has red railings as well, and they really pop in real life on the painting, because it's that like one contrasting pop of red that contrasts with all of the cool colors in the painting. So I was really happy with that. As I go, again, just painting in those windows nice and dark, painting in shadows around window frames, that kind of thing. There's a few spots where my perspective got a little bit wonky on the windows. So if I were going to do it again, I would kind of adjust those. But overall, still very happy with this painting. And it's just so large. Again, it's the first time I painted this large. So I was really happy with how it came out, and it fits over my bed beautifully. So it takes up a nice big space on the wall and really complements my room beautifully. And I'm just really in love with this painting. I couldn't be happier. So thank you so much for watching this painting. I hope you enjoyed it. I know it's time-lapse, so it's not like a detailed tutorial, but I hope that you did learn something from it and maybe try painting larger than what you feel like you're comfortable with. It was really fun and enjoyable, and I love the results. So I recommend trying it. Have an awesome day.